Okay, so remember in the first video when I said I have a really hard time leaving an interesting object alone? Well, this is exactly what I am talking about. This little watch came across my table recently, and the first thing that caught my attention wasn't the name, it was the watch itself. Like, look how tiny this thing is, like on my hand here. Like, it just little spot on my hand. And it's got this beautiful blue enamel, and somehow after more than 100 years, that enamel is still completely intact. The case itself is sterling silver, and cool is it's still on its original strap, which by today's standards, I'm sorry, it looks like it was made for a tiny doll. But if you look at it in the context of the time, it actually makes perfect sense because we're looking at a watch from 1912 when wristwatches were still relatively new and pocket watches were more common. And women's wristwatches in particular were often treated more like a jewelry piece and then a pure timepiece. So you can really see the influence in this one in particular. It's tiny, it's decorative, and it's delicate. And it's not trying to be a giant statement watch like we're used to seeing today. So it was meant to be worn almost like a piece of jewelry. And that's what I actually absolutely love about it. Is because even though we don't know who originally wore it, the materials, the design, and the construction still give us clues about the world it actually came from. But I got curious because now I'm intrigued just by the enamel still being there and everything still intact and it being original. So that's when I got curious and I had to take a look on the inside of the clasp and see what we were dealing with here. So when I opened it up, I found some markings. So 925 was inside here, and it confirmed it was silver. But we also see WD, which is for Wilsdorf and Davis. See, you might not know them by namesake, but Hans Wilsdorf and Alfred Davis established the company in London in around 1905. They worked with Swiss watchmakers and distributed watches all through Britain. But that's when we look at the marking on the movement, and that's where it is. This is a Rolex right there. And that had me stopping right there because not only do we have Wilsdorf and Davis, we also have their trademark name here. Because we're not just looking at a Rolex most of us know today. We're looking at the very early days of Wilsdorf when they registered the name Rolex in 1908. So this little watch comes from a period when that name was still becoming, well, established. So this watch being made in 1912, and you can tell that by the date stamp in there, you start seeing Rolex appear on movements. Well, the older WD markings were still being used on the case. So here we have WD on the case and Rolex on the movement. And suddenly this tiny watch has a much bigger story to it. Wilsdorf, however, wasn't just satisfied with the idea of the wristwatch being a little jewelry piece. He wanted people to trust them as a serious timepiece to wear every day. So in 1910, Rolex wristwatch became the first to receive the Swiss certificate of chronometric precision from the official watch rating center. And then in 1914, Rolex received a Class A precision certificate from the Kew Observatory in England. That was a big deal at the time. So while this little watch looks delicate and decorative, it's sitting right in the middle of a period when the watch itself was starting to prove what it could do. And I think that's absolutely fascinating. But we're so used to the idea of the wristwatch. And nowadays, nobody really thinks twice when they're looking at them. You put it on, you check the time, and you keep going. But someone had to convince the world that this was actually a good idea. And Wilsdorf was very much a part of that. So when I look at this particular watch again, the enamel, the sterling silver, the tiny case, the original strap on it, and having a Rolex movement, you're not just looking at something old anymore. You're looking at a little snapshot of jewelry, fashion, and technology all changing at the same time. And this is where I start going down my rabbit holes, because now I want to know what women were wearing in the 1912 era. What jewelry was popular? What did wristwatches like this mean to a person wearing it? And how did we get from this little tiny thing to what we know today? And this is why I can't just look at something and say, oh, that's an old watch, move along. I feel like there's always more to it. And that's where this particular rabbit hole ends for now. Except I already know what the next piece I'm going to line up for you guys is. And let's just say it doesn't look anything like this. So if you thought you were going to spend this entire channel time looking at old Rolexes, I don't mean to disappoint, but that's also not how my brain works. So next time, we're going to going somewhere else and go a completely different route. And I have a feeling you're going to like what I have lined up. So I'll see you down the next rabbit hole.